A war is raging in Ukraine. Much of the West is dealing with soaring costs of living. The world's top economies are riddled with an energy crunch, while others are looking to fight rising consumer inflation and hunger crises. But amid all this, let's not forget that the planet is in danger. More than 30,000 delegates, including representatives from some 200 countries, will gather in Egypt on November 6th. And on the agenda is climate action. Global leaders will meet to hash out details around ways to dampen climate change and help those already feeling its impact. But with nations dealing with the fallout of Russia's war in Ukraine, along with stuttering economic growth, questions loom. Will they act quickly and ambitiously enough to avoid the worst effects of climate change? A United Nations report released last week showed that most countries are lagging when it comes to their existing commitments to cut carbon output. Global greenhouse gas emissions are on track to rise by 10.6% this decade compared with 2010 levels. Scientists say that emissions must drop by 43% by 2030 to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial temperatures. This is the threshold above which climate change risks spinning out of control. But only 24 of the nearly 200 countries attending the COP27 summit have submitted new or updated emissions-cutting plans, despite their previous COP26 commitments. Meanwhile, the chill in relations between the top greenhouse gas emitters, that is China and the US, does not bode well either. According to climate experts, the fraying diplomatic ties between Washington and Beijing over issues including Taiwan and the war in Ukraine may hamper global climate progress. It's important to note that past collaboration between the two had helped boost climate talks significantly. A few countries, including Chile, Mexico and Turkey, are expected to release new plans during the Egypt conference, but it is still unclear if many major developing economies like China and India will be among them. The two-week UN negotiations in Egypt follow a year of wild weather disruptions around the world, including the devastating floods in Pakistan, South Africa and Nigeria, heat waves in the Arctic and across Europe, and of course record-setting drought in the West and France. The talks are likely to address how these and other nations affected by climate change could be compensated by rich countries who are believed to have triggered all these consequences in the first place. Other topics will likely include how international financial institutions like the World Bank could be reformed to speed up the transition away from fossil fuels. The summit's success could be measured by whether countries deliver agreements to limit the global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. The host country, Egypt, says that COP27 should ensure that developing nations are treated fairly and receive the support that rich countries have promised. And for more perspective, we are now being joined by Louis Torrent, who is an expert on environment and climate change. Louis, thanks for joining us again. Now, most countries are lagging on their existing commitments to cut carbon output. Will we see more lip service at this upcoming summit, or can we hope for action instead?
Hello, thanks for having me in the show. It is indeed a challenging COP, and because of the particular situation and context that we're experiencing worldwide, we are facing a tremendous energy crisis triggered by the war in Ukraine. We're also experiencing famine and hunger crisis, and this might divert a little bit the attention and the investments on other areas rather than climate change. But it's true that there are failures in relations like the one between US and China, but also there are certain good news that, like the recent elections campaign and the victory by Lula da Silva, which brings renewed hope in terms of deforestation in the Amazon. But it's still a very challenging COP, and there are at least two main big challenges that will need to be addressed during these next couple of weeks in Egypt. One is finance, and the other one is adaptation, and specifically loss and damage. It's been said that having the COP organized by Egypt brings an additional a new perspective, because it's the global south that it's at the center of the attention now, and specifically Africa. So the agenda will be focused on the global south and specifically on Africa. So this is an opportunity to bring the attention to developing nations, as you previously mentioned, and push forward for further agreements in that area.
Louis, you mentioned the US and China. That brings me to my next question. How will the ongoing tensions affect climate progress?
Well, the US and China released an announcement last year amidst the COP26 in Glasgow. That was a very welcome agreement, and the agreement included a few topics. One of the most important ones was the methane pledge, which is the methane is the second most important greenhouse gas, and it's been rising exponentially in the last few years. And there's been criticism that it was not sufficiently addressed in the past. So this agreement raised a lot of expectations because there were specific programs that to be developed by these two nations that, let's remember, they both account for 40% of the greenhouse gas emissions worldwide. So it's an important agreement. But sadly speaking, the tensions amidst the Taiwan issue have implied the rupture of this relations. So we cannot expect much progress in that field. But luckily speaking, the US passed the inflation bill recently, which brings renewed hope, renewed investments that probably will be invested in developing nations in the future, hopefully.
Right. Just a final question there, Louis. We've also seen names like Greta Thunberg accuse the forum of greenwashing. Do you agree?
I don't entirely agree with that. I know that there's been criticism that the host, Egypt, has not been very open in allowing civil society to participate, but there's tremendous effort in these climate negotiations. This event is supposed to be an implementation one, and there's a lot of effort put in this. Although political agreements are not usually reached at the highest level, there are certainly some level of agreements, and we are making progress. The problem is that the progress being made is too slow, and especially when it comes to financing. We should be raising at least 100 billion in financing. We are reaching 83, so we need to speed up, especially in climate action, in mitigation, and also in adaptation.
Right, Louis, thank you so much for all those inputs, and thanks for joining us on WION World is One at this hour. WION World is One is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news updates on the move.